Hello, everyone, and welcome to Career Conversations, a University of Rochester virtual series developed to help you navigate your personal and professional journey. This session is being recorded for future viewings, and you can check out our previous presentations in the Career Conversations webinar library. I'm Becky Picone, and I, along with my colleague, Michelle Cavalcanti, work in alumni relations to identify and create professional development programming and resources for the University of Rochester community. Before I introduce Dan and Marcia, I want to mention that there is closed captioning available in the navigation bar, and I'd like to welcome and thank Jesse for being our interpreter for today's session. You're welcome to comment to everyone in the chat box, but if you do have any questions for Dan and Marcia, I encourage you to send them directly to me, Becky Picone, in the private chat, and I'll read the questions I receive as well as any questions that came in with your registrations during our Q&A session following the presentation. We'll get to as many questions as that we have time for. Now I would like to introduce Dan and Marcia Mantell, who will be presenting today on understanding and embracing retirement planning. Hi, Dan and Marcia. For nearly 30 years, Marcia Mantell has helped the country's foremost financial services firms and advisors increase their knowledge of complex retirement concepts and regulations. As the president of Mantell Retirement Consulting, Inc., she regularly partners with financial institutions and advisors to help them support their customers across the retirement spectrum, saving, transitioning, creating income to last a lifetime. Dan Mantell has built two successful careers since his time here on the River campus. First in the pre-digital photographic world as a master of instant film development and coding technologies at Polaroid, and then for the last 20 years as a wealth manager and financial advisor for high net worth clients and their families. He built a financial advisory practice in the private bank of Wachovia and then Wells Fargo. And today he's a financial advisor at Janney Montgomery Scott. And there he provides comprehensive financial planning and sophisticated investment strategies that help his clients make the most of their todays and plan for their tomorrows. So Dan and Marcia, we're so happy to have you with us today. And with that, I will pass it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Becky. How are we doing? Can you see the screen?
Yes, yep. Looks great.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. Obviously, I'm Marcia Mantell.
I'm Dan Mantell.
And we are very proud alumni of the University of Rochester, class of 83 for me, and
82.
We're Dan. We're super excited to be here and to talk about important things like embracing retirement planning, because it's really important for all of us to do. You know, we thought we'd go back just a tad, though. I'll snap my. Oh, just one second. We've got a little issue with the connection here. Let me stop sharing and then start again. Let's try this. Yeah, you know, if you don't start PowerPoint up correctly, that should do it. All right, so we'll go back in time for just 2 seconds.
Long time ago,
1979, Dan and I met in front of at Susan B. Anthony Hall, that they now call Sue B, when it used to be the Hill. We went on to get married a few years later, right after I graduated, and blink of an eye,
two daughters,
and 40 years between these parts of the journey.
Who would have thought?
And we have both come into financial services, not through a direct route, but through Securitas kind of route. And we've ended up becoming these experts in retirement. And we love everything about retirement. So we're going to cover a few key topics with you today.
So starting with understanding and embracing longevity. Many people think they're only going to live so long. The surprise is they live probably longer than that. Next is there are key calendar dates based on age, and you need to begin to mark those calendars as you mark time so that you begin to do the planning that goes with those. Next, we're going to talk about government retirement programs, things like Social Security and Medicare as a foundation for your financial plan. Then the idea of double duty investing as you are now in retirement and you need to provide an income, but still growth for the future. And then as time allows, we'll get to some questions.
Yes, we'll also have our emails for you. So if we don't get to a question or something you'd like, you're welcome to email us. All right, so this idea of longevity, Dan, this is not just the numbers that we hear about and the averages. What we typically hear about and talk about in the media is life expectancy. And life expectancy is just simply not anything that is going to be helpful to us. And we see it in terms of centenarians. And we will be a generation of much older people as a cohort than we usually have seen in the past. Geez, sorry, folks. This system is having a bit of a problem. Ah, there we go. All right. So George Burns says you can't help getting older, but you don't have to get old. Your favorite.
Old age is always 15 years older than I am. And that's what I kept on telling my college roommate, best man at our wedding, is he was old, I wasn't.
Yes. And today is the oldest you've ever been and the youngest you'll ever be again. So just kind of, keep this in mind that it's only getting better, but we are getting older. And average life expectancy is typically what we hear about. And we know that average life expectancy has been moving, well, up and down due to COVID and such, but it's around mid-70s. But this is not a measure we use in retirement because they measure average life expectancy from the time we're born. And then it's the point in time when half of the people born in 1960 are no longer here and half are.
But that's not relevant for retirement planning.
No, what we need to work on and embrace is longevity. And longevity is about the odds that you're going to live longer than the averages. And the averages are already getting up there. So
if you're, for instance, a male age 65, it's not going to be the 70s is what that average age is. The average length of your lifetime, if you've reached 75, is going to be 82. If you've reached 75, it will be 86. Notice that is a very different time frame than what you saw in the previous slide. So you have to think about it in retirement just a little bit different.
Yeah, we look at it. You have to first jump over the retirement hurdle. The first hurdle is we get to 65. So of course, if you didn't get to 65, well, retirement planning is not really important, is it? So for women, we live even longer, right? If you make it to 75, your average life expectancy is going to be 87. So 50% of us will still be alive. You can get to 95 for all of us, and you've got 3 more good years in front of you. And we just had some excitement in your family.
Well, my dad turned 100 earlier this month, and my mom turned 99 last month. And so what you're seeing is that the number of centurions is going up. And let's think about this, not just for the general population. How about the next slide?
Oh,
But
yeah.
let's think about it from the perspective of University of Rochester alumni, ones who have good careers, who have been probably good earners.
Yeah, higher income. So we see not only that life expectancy is not a marker, we need to be planning for our mid to late 90s, but income plays a really big role in that. So the higher your income is, the more likely you are to live a long time in retirement. And it's pretty stark. So those at the lowest end of income, well, the men live 6 years less than the women and 15 years fewer than the high income men.
Think about healthcare, think about food, nutrition, and that sort of stuff begins to narrow that gap up at the top of this between men and women, and exacerbates the gap between wealthy and not well off.
Yeah. So as you plan, if you're part of a couple, the other sort of myth has been, well, we plan for the woman to live longer. And yeah, ladies, we do tend to live longer, but not by much when you're in the higher income ranges. And you don't have to be $1 million earners here. We're just talking about, on a continuum, are you among the higher earners here? And frankly, most alumni are going to be in the higher earner buckets. So this becomes a challenge for planning. And part of why it's so important to get ahead of planning for your retirement, because you're going to have at least a 30-year span to plan for.
So what is 30 years? 11,400 days.
Yeah, just a few days to go together, honey.
That's a typical retirement. And I guess a question for the audience. This is a real question that I'd like you to answer in the chat box, if you would. What are you going to do in retirement? Real question to you right now. Can you type in
Just
what are you
a
going
couple
to
of
do?
words. What are you going to do for your next, after 65, 11,400 days? Let's see what your idea. Oh, continue working
new
part-time.
career, travel and woodwork.
Oh, Dan wants to meet you.
Travel, move to Panama, volunteer for their church, woodworking, nonprofit, travel,
All right.
travel more.
More travel. That's great.
This is
grandchildren. Yep.
is very interesting. And the idea of travel, first off, it's great because we have a slide for it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is we get in our clients, we get the answer travel so much, but 24/7, 365 travel is really unusual. It will be intermittent travel.
Yeah.
So think maybe a little bit differently.
Yeah, and we're getting some great, answers. Travel, bike, ski,
Families.
family. I saw genealogy in there, a personal favorite of mine. Yes.
writing
So
or
it isn't
teaching.
just about travel, but it is a challenge. And so we wanted to throw a challenge out for you and give you a resource. I've been writing a blog since, I don't know, it's 10 or 12 years now, called boomerretirementbriefs.com for us boomers. And it's what boomers do and some inspiring ideas, plus a lot about Social Security and Medicare. But we kept running into this difficult time when talking really to anyone of what are you going to do to fill those days? And people couldn't do it. So anyway, I created this little book, but in there is this worksheet and this idea: can you just lay out 1 week? You don't have no obligations, no meetings, no one telling you what to do. You don't have to be up at 6 a.m. anymore.
What do you do?
What do you do? Can you fill it out? And it's much more challenging than you may think. And I wanted Dan to make dinners, and Dan said no. So apparently we're going to be starving to death in retirement. I'm not
Hey,
sure.
I like my wife's cooking better than my mom. So, it's better off for me.
For you.
She cooks. But so, go through the exercise and think about who inspires you and who has done this well, maybe who hasn't done it well. What do I want to do? What don't I want to do? And just sketch it out to give yourself a feel for what your retirement will be like.
Absolutely. And there's the worksheet. It looks similar to this, is available to you now, no cost, on boomerretirementbriefs.com. So that's what we're doing in retirement. Now, to map out retirement, well, we need to build a calendar, and it's a really different calendar than what we're used to. And we talk about them in terms of milestone birthdays, and they're here, these birthdays, and we need to focus in on what we're doing.
So when you think about, your retirement, it's often driven by the different plans that you've participated in. So the employer plans, the 401k, the 403b, you've heard of those. Small business plans, SEPs and Simples and profit sharing, or for many of us, most of us, it's the traditional IRAs or rollover IRAs. And the key thing with all of these accounts is that point that these are tax deferred, but now the IRS wants their money back. They want to be that. So when you take money out of these are taxable events.
Taxable income. Yep. And you get to continue to build them, assuming that, we don't know who all is on this webinar, but, we've got some younger people and some older people. Ideally, 50 is when the turn occurs and these milestone birthdays become super important.
So the first birthday is age 50. And this is when you can add more to your retirement plans than what you've been doing up till now, to add this catch-up contribution for employer plans and IRAs. Age 55 is when you can begin to put more in your health savings account. Healthcare costs in retirement, very important cost. You can start saving more for that. And then the weirdest number in retirement is age 59 and a half. This is when you can start taking the money out. It will be taxable, but it is no longer subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty.
And then your 60s, as we march along through the years of the calendar, the 60s are all about Social Security and Medicare. So at 60, this is the earliest age that a widow or widower can apply for Social Security and get a survivor benefit. 62 is the earliest age we can claim Social Security retirement benefits for individually, all of us.
And
But
the key thing that Marcia just said there was the word individual. All of these plans, you're so used to family and that at your employer, it is now about the individual. It's still family financial planning, but all of these programs are individually focused.
yeah, and you have to personally reach each of these ages. So Dan is much older than I am. So
6 months.
so when he reaches, 62, and I'm not there, well, Dan could open Social Security. I cannot. 65, Medicare. This is still the age for Medicare to be available. You might not need to turn it on yet, but that's the opening gate into Medicare. And for most of us, we have a full retirement age between 66 and 67. And that's when you get your optimal amount of Social Security. Now, new in the latest legislation that just came out, Secure 2.0, there are even more opportunities to save for retirement in your 60s now, but only when you turn 60, 61, 2, or 3, you'll get to make additional catch-up contributions. So that's coming starting in 2025. And this is very much in recognition from the Congress that we're not all ready to retire. We don't have the funding and the meaty account balances that we really need to tackle a 30-year long retirement. And then 70 is the age when you can receive your maximum Social Security benefit. So you can shoot for that. It's better than 62, but mostly if you shoot for your full retirement age, that's your marker.
Another weird age, 70 and a half. If you have money in a traditional IRA and you are charitably inclined, there is a provision that you can take money from the IRA and go directly to a qualified charity. Now, here's the thing. When you do that, you don't pay any income tax on that withdrawal. That's unusual. Usually you pay income tax, but here's the catch. You don't get the charitable deduction. So you get this 100,000, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Why take it out, put it in your pocket, pay income tax, and then make the charitable deduction? The IRS has come up with this idea to do this qualified.
Yeah, but it's part of meeting your required minimum distributions, which now are, well, this crazy range of ages.
So depends upon when you're born. This is the recent legislation, Secure 2.0.
Yeah.
Depending upon when you were born is about when you have to begin to take your required minimum distributions. So 72, if you were born, in the 50s, 51 to 59 at 73. If you were in the 60s or later, you have to start by age 75.
And all the required minimum distributions is a specific calculated amount of your balances that you must pull out of those, literally withdraw from the IRAs and pay your income tax on it. So this is where, as you mentioned earlier, Uncle Sam comes knocking at the door and needs to start collecting the tax revenue from the savings.
It's not about getting money into the retirement plan. It's about the complexity of it coming out.
Exactly. And there are even more dates that we don't typically talk about. And we would never know, unless we're getting ready to retire. But age 62, there's another piece to 62. And this is the first year you would be eligible to consider looking into or buying a reverse mortgage, if that's a product you are interested in. At 63, we use this in the planning world as the last year you want to convert traditional IRAs to Roth IRAs if you are planning to start Medicare at 65. And that's because you're going to trip into too high of an income band if you're converting money after you're already in Medicare. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then age 85, mark your calendars for 85, because first of all, you'll likely be here. And secondly, it's the oldest age you can begin distributions if you buy a QLAC, is what we call it, a qualified longevity annuity contract. So that's where you can buy an annuity today, but not turn it on until your 80s. You're buying some income when you are much, much older. So lots of milestone birthdays, but in addition, we become responsible as we no longer are working. We have to create our own estimated taxes and make sure we're paying them, because you become responsible for paying taxes as you earn income, even when we're not working.
It used to be your employer who took care of this and withholding from your paycheck and all that sort of stuff. Guess what? It's now yours.
Right. So you
You're
have to pay,
responsible.
and it's not that easy. There's not on a consistent basis. So income that you receive January through March of any of the years you're retired, well, your estimated tax payment is due April 15th. But then income you receive just April and May, well, you got to pay up on that in June. And then income in June, July, and August, you pay in September. And then the last 4 months of the year, well, those tax payments are due by January 15th of the following year. So it's quirky. And so I call them these quirky quarters, not exactly quarters, but you need to mark your calendars for these and not miss them. And the biggest question we got, is like, well, what is income? We're not working anymore. So you'll see the exact definition of income using the front of your 1040 form. It's the 1040 or the 1040 SR for the seniors. And you'll see what is defined as income. And it's distributions from your IRAs, distributions from your retirement plans from work, employer plans, non-qualified deferred comp or stock options that you may be fortunate enough to have, capital gains taxes, capital gains count as income, taxable interest, Social Security is taxable income.
Now that surprises folks more often than not.
Yeah.
Social Security, there are parts of it that is taxable.
Yeah, most people, again, higher income folks are going to have Social Security taxed, as are pensions, annuities, and so forth. So just take a look at the front of a 1040 and that will tell you what you need to know.
So when you think about putting together a retirement plan, the government programs are your foundation that you build on. They're not the only thing though, but they provide the foundation for building an income in retirement.
Yeah, I talk about the bottom layer of a layer cake. And Social Security is the program that we all count on the most. 90 to 92% of all of us will be eligible for Social Security. And it works like this, that again, back to the individual, each person needs to be independently eligible for Social Security, or they will be a dependent spouse. So in order to get your Social Security benefits, you first had to pay in. This is a pay to play program. And you need to earn 40 credits or pay FICA for 40 quarters, a minimum amount. And usually it takes about 10 years. And then all the quarters after that you work are great, but you need at least 40. Then your own independent earnings record is what Social Security will use to calculate your benefit. So for us, we always laugh about our Social Security statement. And we see, our first jobs were 1978 for you, I
You
think.
worked at Athlete's Foot selling sneakers.
Yeah, and I was 1979 working at McDonald's one summer. So that's where our record starts. And what Social Security will do is they look at every single year where you have any earnings and they index those earnings up. They adjust it for wage inflation so that the dollars going into the calculator are more current. They're more like the value of today's dollars. So that happens up to age 60, then your earnings that you're earning today just pepper into the calculation.
So what you'll want to do is look at your Social Security record.
Mhm.
How do you do that? You go on ssa.gov, ssa.gov, and you can pull, and it has the history of all your work years and what you earned. And guess what happened to me when I did that is I had, back when I was a graduate student doing a PhD, is I had a bunch of zeros. I didn't have 35 years when I first
Earnings.
looked of earnings when
Yeah.
I first looked at this. And so each year that I work now, not one of those zeros, or actually those zeros are all gone.
They're
But
not all
but
gone.
but the athlete's foot, is that still there? I'm not sure. But as you continue to work, you knock off the lower and you add more years, and it can make a difference in your plan on when do you retire.
It really does, because Social Security is going to look at your entire career and all these indexed earnings and all of Dan's zeros, and they'll pick the highest 35 to go into the calculator. And we call this the AMY. They're looking for, on average, how much did you earn per month over a 35-year history. And so it does it. It allows you to boot out some of the zeros and some of the low earnings years. And that gives you what we call the AMY, average indexed monthly earnings. And then to see and to get to the number on your statement, how much are you going to get every month? Well, then that AMY gets split into 3 bands. There's a calculator, a set calculation to determine your what we call PIA, your primary insurance amount. And that's the monthly income you can expect from Social Security when you reach your full retirement age. But you have to consider a couple of other factors. First is, when will you claim and how will you claim? So not only is your earnings history going to be very important, but also your marital status. And you will either be looked at when Social Security does an assessment for you individually. Are you a spouse, an ex-spouse, a surviving spouse, or is your work record the best record on which you will get your monthly earnings, your monthly benefit? So over a lifetime, as you look at these 4 categories, well, you might be in all of them. I mean, right now, Dan and I, we're in bucket number 4. We each have our own work history. We're also married, so we're spouses. So which record is going to yield the highest income for us? And that you assess when you claim. So over your lifetime, you can be in several or all of these, or just one, but you only ever get one benefit at a time. And this is a point of confusion for a lot of people. Like, oh, I'm a spouse and I'm an individual. Oh, and I have an ex-spouse out there too. So I'll just collect all 3. No, you only get one. We'd love another time for you to play in the chat. I always love the chat feature. What's the average, do you think, that people are getting from Social Security? So after, all these years, you might be working 45 years, 35 years are counted into the benefit calculation. How much are people getting on average out of Social Security? So we're seeing numbers
2,800, 1,500, 3,800, 2,400, 1,800.
Yep, there was an 800, 1,200 a month, 1,000. Any other guesses? So the good news is most of you are a little bit low, but you're in the ballpark, right? Social Security does not replace your income. It was never designed to do that. It's designed to help you put a roof over your head and put food on the table.
That's it.
That's it. And it does that. And it's been doing that for 86 years now. So, not such a bad program. So for gentlemen, you guys, you're going to have an average of about $22,000 a year if you're at your full retirement age this year and you claimed your benefits, or $1,800 a month. So those of you who guessed 1,800, spot on.
Spot on. That's average.
Except not for us girls. We have a much different number, and sadly a much lower number.
So why?
Because we have popcorn careers. We come in and out, as you mentioned earlier. We have these inherent gaps that many of us face. Even if we've worked all the years since 18 or 20 or whatnot, the years, if you have children, the years that you had to step out for maternity leave, you got hit with no income in those years. Or you might have wages, a wage gap between, what a man would earn and what you're earning for the same job. Or I call it the mom gap. We stay out of work for several years with our kids, and then the care gap, and then the widow gap. So a lot of issues, we do multiple things, the multitasker women. So we see the implication in our Social Security checks.
So what's the maximum?
Yeah.
What's the most?
And
how
that's-
do you get there?
Yeah, this is the maximum payment. So for the highest earners, and I always say the $1 million earners, making $1 million, that's awesome. But you're only going to get $3,600 a month this year if you're at your full retirement age. And that's because there is a cap on how much FICA dollars are put into Social Security for each of us. And this year it's capped at $160,200. So if you make that amount of money, or it's equivalent in all the earlier years of your career, you're going to cap out at about $3,600 a month. Nowhere near $1 million a year, but again, it's not meant to replace your income. Now, the next piece about Social Security that's important to know, you can get a little bit more, and sometimes a lot more, than the benefit at your full retirement age. And you do that by waiting to claim a little bit later, up until age 70. And the general rule here is you get 8% per 8% per year more for each year you wait up until age 70. So you can get a lot more, or
if you claim early before your full retirement age, you can have a significant reduction. And here's the thing that really sets both Marcia and me off, is when either the news media or advisors scare people into claiming early, claiming at age 62, because Social Security won't be there. You are making a lifelong decision to get less money from Social Security when you do that. Either about a third less if you have a full retirement age at 67, or for those born a little bit earlier, full retirement age 66, a quarter.
Yeah.
And you're not just making that decision for yourself, you're impacting your surviving spouse. And significantly, when somebody dies, there's always less money coming into the household. And if you've had this reduction, it's even less.
exactly. So with that happy note, let's turn our attention now to Medicare, the other side of the coin with these government programs. So we have Social Security bringing in income, and then we need our health care taken care of. And Medicare is a complicated part of the law. And frankly, it's an extraordinarily complicated part of the law. And you have to define what Medicare is going to be for you. It's not just one thing. It's not one health insurance. There are multiple pieces to everyone's Medicare. I call this one the quartet. You can choose to have Medicare Part A and Part B, plus a Medigap supplemental policy, plus a Part D prescription drug insurance plan. Or you can choose the trio, and there you have Medicare Part A and B, plus you will buy a Medicare Advantage plan with the drug plan already wrapped in. So all of us start here, and we have to decide quartet or trio. Well, what do these parts even do? Well, Part A covers you when you go to the hospital and skilled nursing care after coming out of a surgery or a health event. Part B is what covers your physicians and outpatient services. And then Part D covers drugs. But these parts of Medicare were never designed to cover all of your needs in the situation, the health situation. It actually comes in to help you pay your entire share. They're going to take the burden off. But it comes with a price tag. And Medicare is not free. This is always a big surprise. Part A is no premium, no monthly premium, but there are usage costs when you go into a hospital. But Part B, you do have to pay for, and you pay a monthly premium. This year, it's $164.90 per month per person. And once you have this in place, it will cover 80% of the cost. You have to pick up the other 20, unless you pick the quartet or the trio. But interestingly, that $164.90 is not the number for everyone. And this is where earlier we talked about income, and watching your income when you're a retiree matters, and income shows up on the front of your 1040. So if you are married filing jointly and have a modified adjusted gross income of $194,000 or less, you will pay 164.90 each of you. And if you're a single filer with a modified adjusted gross income of 97,000 or less, you also pay 164.90.
But what if you did a Roth conversion and you threw an extra $100,000 to convert from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA?
Well, you'll
What
pay
happens?
more. You will meet IRMA. And with IRMA, this is a shorthand for income related monthly adjustment amount. So means testing. Those with higher income have the means to pay more for their Part B premiums. And this is this year's table. So, you can take a look and see where your income might be as a retiree, and you'll get an idea of how much each of you will be paying.
So that idea where Marcia was talking about age 63 is the earliest time, is the latest time to do things like Roth conversions. That is because Medicare does a 2-year look back, and it would see at the higher income, and each person, the individual
Yeah.
again, is not paying 164, they're paying 330.
Yeah.
And boy, does that make clients mad.
They're so mad about this. And to add insult to injury, you also have to pay additional premiums to get a Part D plan. So this is, if you're going to fall into this range, better know now, better plan now, because these costs will only continue to go up as we move throughout retirement. So what do we do? This is not the best news, right?
Well, you've got to replace your paycheck. You're now retired. You're no longer working for somebody else. You have to create your own paycheck. And so that's this idea of double duty investing. So here's a question for the group, real question. Will you spend more or less in retirement than when you're working?
So just type in the chat, I'm going to spend more or I'm going to spend less, just more or less. Let's see what we get. More, I hope. Less, more, less, slightly
Mhm.
less, same, more, less, roughly the same. Hard to say.
Same,
Well, we
yeah.
got to help you on that one because it's
So let's look at what is the real data of what people spend. And the surprising thing is only 10% spend lower in retirement than when they're working.
Yeah.
About half is about the same.
Yeah.
And then this, 1/3 spend somewhat higher or much higher.
I'm in the much higher group.
And so, well, whatever it is, the surprise is that when you retire, it's unusual to have your expenses go down. So when you're planning, generally, you're going to be planning for spending more. So let's think about how much. So if, let's say, you're spending $60,000 a year, you retire at age 67, you live 30 years, 60 grand times 30 years is $1.8 million of spending
Before inflation.
before inflation. So, okay, not everybody has $1.8 million saved. So what that means is this double duty. You have the income lane, it's got to replace your paycheck, pay for your expenses. That's things like, the Social Security and annuities or things like that, that
actually create your cash.
yeah.
You need cash flow in retirement.
But if you don't have that $1.8 million, what you do have has to grow and grow more than inflation. Because let's think about inflation, the corrosive effect of inflation.
Yeah.
If inflation is about 2%, the long-term, 2.5%, the long-term average, your purchasing power is cut in half in about 25 years. And this makes sense. All you have to do is go back to when you bought your first car, what you paid for a gallon of milk, what a stamp cost, all those kinds of things. So you have to take advantage of the growth assets, typically stocks, and you are a long-term investor. And that makes a difference. So if you've got a 30-year investment horizon, you can you can take advantage of those growth assets.
Can I ask a
Exactly.
clarification question quickly? We've had a couple questions coming in.
Sure.
And one of them was just, I know you talked about inflation a little bit and the value of your dollar, going forward, but with the retiree spending more, is it mostly just inflation then, or do you also see actual spending changes?
No, if they report, they actually forget inflation in that data. This is what real retirees, they thought they were going to spend less and they actually spend more.
Okay.
Inflation doesn't matter. It's just their actual cash outlay.
And
Yeah.
does that adjustment increase also to kind of cover the increase in medical expenses as well?
Medical expenses in retirement typically higher,
Mhm.
as you get older than, a healthy 60-year-old, a healthy 80-year-old is paying more because they've got more stuff.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
that's actually a good question because we look at these as risks in retirement, and we've got, health is such a big one, and the investor risks that you may get sicker or have health issues and health shocks, and that will, take a big bite out of your budget if you haven't planned appropriately for the possibility of that. So that's, whether it's the quartet or the trio, having adequate insurance is super important. Not everyone does. And there are other risks. Inflation happens to be top of mind today because we've had, a couple of years of, relatively sticky high inflation, but, not like when we were young in the 70s and 80s. It was much more rampant then. But these risks, they are much more meaningful or impactful to us when we don't work for an employer anymore and we're trying to figure out how to make these portfolios last. So these risks are really a big deal in planning for retirement.
Mhm.
But the one thing that you can control is spending versus overspending.
Yeah.
That is the piece. So let's think about, the time frame and kind of how you invest. So the younger people, 20, 30s, and 40s, they have a long investment horizon. Investing in stocks and bonds works well. By the time you go to your 50s and 60s, you're beginning to transition to more midterm investing. So if long-term is, greater than 7 years, midterm is maybe
2 and 5.
5.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Then you get to retirement.
and then you get to retirement, and this creating the income is for the cash flow today. And so you need a strategy that is going to be growth sum, but also income sum.
Exactly. And here are the definitions that we typically use for the ranges. So a short-term investor, you need to, if you're retiring in 2 years, you need a big bucket of cash so that you're going to meet your
You're
bills.
not going to take
But-
stock risk
Right.
at short term.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Right. And medium range, 5 to 10 years, and long-term, 10 or more years, which says in retirement, all the way until you're 90, you have a big component of long-term investing.
So, and what that does is short term, notice that there are no stocks in here. Why? Because you don't want, when the stock market is down, you don't want to have to sell a stock when it's down. Medium range, you can begin to build in some more stocks. And then the long-term portion is the growth assets, mostly those more risky, but less risky over the long term because they can grow and keep up with inflation.
So, so I showed Dan this slide the other day. He goes, "What is this?" But I saw a comment come over going, "This is
It's
so
confusing.
confusing and complex." Yeah, we know this was a lot. It was a lot in a very short period of time. It is incredibly complex to think about how you are going to use the resources you have to create a sufficient cash flow to last 30 or more years in retirement.
So
So
how
this
do-
is what it looks like.
Well, but the question is how do you address this? And I think the way is to begin to educate yourself.
Yeah.
Is to begin to look at these topics and address them for yourself and arm yourself with information.
Yeah, and it is
and
connecting the
knowledge.
dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does start with this education. So please don't be freaked out by anything you heard here today. There are so many moving parts, but there's an order and a sequence to much of this. And there are tried and true rules, if you will, in the investing world. So whether you work with a financial advisor, whether you use the free resources that are out there for you, there's a lot of educational information, even if you've never done this before. So with that,
This-
if you haven't put your head down on your desk
Thank
and
you.
want
We've
to
had
ask some
very-
questions,
We've had a really wonderfully active chat, so I could tell everybody's kind of completely intrigued.
excellent.
So I think we'll dive right in to try to get as many of these questions as we can. Since we were just talking about Medicare, one question that came in was, is there a penalty if you don't sign up on time with Part A?
No. Part A is, it's tied with Social Security, and there's no penalty because there's no monthly premium. There is a penalty, however, if you don't sign up for Part B timely and correctly.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that question. Another question is, how many years does it take to catch up with the cost of waiting to the cost of waiting to withdraw your Social Security? And by that they mean is that if you wait until 67, for the 5 years from 62 to 67, you receive 0 as a trade-off for more at age 67.
Yeah, we talk about this in terms of the break even. So I have a passionate plea first, which is don't worry about the break even. This is not an asset. But to answer your question more directly, it's always about age 80. At 80, all the lines cross, whether you started at 62, 67, or 70. The issue, though, is the monthly income coming from Social Security only gets bigger if you wait longer. And the cumulative amount that you get is much more substantial the longer you can wait. Now, that being said, I don't advocate waiting until 70 unless you still are working. If you can just keep your sort of eye on the prize, which is full retirement age, that's your optimal calculation. That's the number that's ideal to get. But anything before full retirement age, you are really not going to be happy in your 80s or your 90s.
When you have no chance or unlikely to have a chance of earning additional income from employment.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Another question about Social Security. How can we contact the Social Security Administration to ask about prior service that we'd like to buy back if I'm in a current union retirement system?
I have no idea. I've never heard that question. I don't think there's any buyback. You have to have what we call covered wages,
Mhm.
but perhaps with this union situation, there's some special avenue.
Did you pay FICA in the union?
No, it depends. Some
Yeah.
unions do and are covered employment and some aren't. So the best place to go is I would poke around on ssa.gov and go to the contact us. They have a whole contact page. And maybe I would start with an email to the SSA. First of all, you have to wait like an hour, hour and a half to get through on the phone lines. So I would lay your situation out very specifically of exactly the union, the dates and whatnot, and send them an email and see if you can get any kind of response that way before you waste your time sitting on the phone.
All right, great. Thank you.
Or contact me and I'll see if I can come up with anything else.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I'm 62. Is there a 30,000 cap for investing both 401k, HSA, and IRA? Is there?
They're each different.
They're each different. So you can get to the maximum of each. I don't remember where the 401ks are at this point, but you can do well, it depends on your company's plan. So first of all, you have to know the plan document. You can get up to whatever their maximum is, plus the catch up. And then you can separately contribute to an IRA. It's probably not deductible. They're different income levels.
Yeah.
So maybe you do a Roth IRA if you qualify within your income. And then the HSA also has caps depending if you're an individual or covering one other person. You get an extra $1,000 for the catch up on the HSA. So I think it's $8,300 or $8,400 this year. But you can have each of those.
Each plan is separate and distinct.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And this question came in actually on the registration and just now. I really like my job and would like to keep working through at least 75. What are the implications for Social Security and required 401k distributions while still drawing a salary?
It's an excellent question. So Social Security, I'll take first. Regardless how long you're going to work past 70, you really must claim Social Security the month you turn 70. Otherwise, you're just leaving your own benefits on the table.
Yeah.
So don't do that. You can spend that money elsewhere. You can gift it later, whatever. You will have to pay tax on it, but don't leave that money on the table. Now, when you claim at 70, that automatically triggers your Medicare Part A. So you need to be really aware of that, because if you're working and covered by that employer's health insurance plan, and you pick a high deductible health plan with an HSA, you can no longer contribute to the HSA about 9 months prior to your 70th birthday. So there's a lot of coordination here when you're working after, really after 65, with Social Security and Medicare, but don't delay claiming. And I hear that, people go, oh, I'm not claiming until I didn't claim until 74. Again,
Doesn't make sense.
don't do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the 401k side, on
Yeah.
RMDs. So required minimums must begin at those ages with 72, 73, 75, except in a plan where you are an active worker. So if you're working for, company X and you have the 401k, you can keep contributing to it, or 403b, and you do not take required minimums out of that. But you must take all your IRAs or an old 401k you have sitting at another job,
Prior
or
employer.
whatever else you have sitting out there. But
Okay.
just at the employer, you're okay.
So
Okay.
I see a question here. Essentially, what makes you think, Marcia, that Social Security will be around through our retirement?
Because it will, because it's a law, it's not going bankrupt. It's understanding the structure of what Social Security is. And remember, I use that phrase, you pay to play. Well, so long as we have workers, they pay into Social Security, and then that money comes back out to pay all of us when we're older.
So Marcia's dad thanks us for working.
Yeah, he checks in to make sure he's getting his check still. But what you have to understand is it won't complete in today's law. We are using the savings account that's attached to this big checking account that's churning money in and out every day. The savings account is being used to fund our current retirees, and that's the only piece of Social Security that is wobbly. So we need Congress to, I'm trying to pick the nicer words. We need Congress to take a look at the law and look at all the provisions that have been offered out there to shore up this savings reserve account, to make sure that all of us get 100% of our benefits and not just 78% of our benefits. So it will be there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. There's so many coming in here. Aside, related to that, is there a way to not pay taxes on Social Security?
Yes, be poor.
Hmm.
It really, I mean, I'm not just meaning to be snarky. I mean, you really, really have to manage your income. If you're single, you would have to manage your income to be less than $25,000 for the year. So really, you're only getting Social Security. And married couples, it's 34,000 or less.
Okay.
So it's really hard to live on those numbers.
Okay.
But that's the only way you get around, avoid taxation of Social Security
I
benefits.
suppose if all you had was cash and you live off of your $1.8 million in cash, you're getting
Yeah,
a
it's
little
not
bit of
income.
interest. It's not income, but the interest is.
But your Social Security might be enough to kick you up into the thresholds where you have to pay anyway.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Does the Medicare Part B premium adjust every year based on a 2-year look back?
The Medicare Part B premium adjusts in 2 ways every year. The first is that the premiums go up every year with inflation, and that's you were mentioning earlier.
Just the baseline, everybody.
Everybody. So that 164.90 will not be 164.90 next year, or it's highly unlikely. And healthcare inflation typically runs twice the rate of inflation. Now, during this period, I'm not talking about it's going to be 12%, but it runs much higher than normal inflation or average inflation.
Okay,
The other place where the numbers change for each of your individual Part B premiums, they will be redetermined every year in November. So they're going to look back 2 years to your 2 years ago tax returns. And if that's lower than it was 3 years ago, you get a lower monthly premium. So
okay,
it is redetermined every year by Social Security. And there's a way to appeal the year you retire. You might have made a whole lot of money 2 years ago, but now you're retiring and you're only going to make a third of that. There's an appeal form that you fill out and you go back to Social Security with an approved reason, retirement, and they will redetermine looking at your current year's income. Usually you have to do that appeal 2 years in a row, but there's a way around that higher premium.
all right, great, thank you. This time's going so fast. Another question that came in was, I'm wondering, with the discussion about work-life balance today, have any of the recommendations changed? I'm in my 30s and considering part-time work over my lifespan versus full-time work for a 20 to 30-year chunk.
Oh, I love that question. I've done a lot with work-life balance.
And your glib answer is,
Well, my glib answer is there's no such thing as
As work-life.
work-life balance in the short term. But I love this question because she's looking, or he's looking, over the long term. So yeah, there are always trade-offs. And if you can create your lifestyle where you're happy and making enough to meet whatever your family's needs are by going part-time, then have at it. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm a big champion for that. But understand that the lower your earnings, during your lifetime, then the lower your Social Security benefit will be. But you've also adjusted to that lifestyle.
but it's also likely that the savings, our slide where it says 60,000 per
Mm.
year over 30 years, it's
Is-
likely that that nest egg is also going to be lower.
But they're not
So-
spending $60,000 either.
But
So-
you're making decisions now that affect you when you can't work, when you're 85. And
Mhm.
so, and we've pretty clearly addressed that it's likely that you're going to make it to 85. So make your decisions for yourself now, but also, take care of yourself when you're 85, and that's savings.
Yeah, but when you've got a 30-year runway, I mean, they're in their 30s of this question, you're looking out for the
Right.
first 30, which gets you to retirement, you adjust. And if that is what's the most important to you and will make you happy, fantastic.
Mhm.
There's no right or wrong here.
Yeah, and it's not the planner who gets to decide.
No,
It is
not
you, the client, the person, it's your values that is most important.
Okay, great. We're rounding out. I'm going to try to fit in one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Really, this time went too fast, but this question was, I'd like to just know if there are any additional resources besides Medicare to help with medical insurance and prescription plans at 62.
Yes. So if you're not working, so your employer's your first stop. When you have income and asset shortfalls, your local SHINE or SHIP representative in your state, so it's SHIP, S-H-I-P, they're the state health insurance people who will help you navigate what the opportunities are in each state. Every state has different rules around how they help people who can't afford their medications or are having difficulty paying for their health care. But start there. It is a state provided free resource.
Where do you find
And-
SHIP and SHINE?
Yeah, you go to the website SHIP, SHIP, TA is Thomas Apple Center.org, or just Google on your zip code, 02339 SHIP or 02339, healthcare free assistance. And they are very, very well versed in what the options are in your state, county, and zip code.
Okay. Okay, great. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap up here. I just want to thank you so much for your wealth of information. I do want to mention, I know Michelle mentioned this in the chat, we are going to be sending a follow-up email with a lot of the links that were shared, with a video recording of this session, so you can go back and look at the slides and hear all of this information again. It's so hard to absorb all at once. And if you have any questions, we're sharing contact information. You can always contact us here in Career Resources. And we just want to thank you so much, Dan and Marcia, for joining us
We're
today.
delighted to be invited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at our next career conversations. And please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.